Ted Rowlands filling in for Vinnie Politan. The subject of our investigation is the case against Sean Diddy Combs. While his federal trial didn't end in a full win for the prosecution, it did reveal details about his conduct that shocked a lot of people around the country. Here's the story. Sean Diddy Combs was once a towering figure in hip-hop and business. The details of his parties he called freak-offs and how he treated some of his employees shocked people around the country. They came to light in his federal trial, which included allegations that he operated a criminal enterprise spanning 2 decades, coercing women into drug-fueled sexual encounters. Key testimony included that of Cassie Ventura, Combs' former partner, who described years of abuse, which was backed up by surveillance footage showing Combs assaulting her in a hotel hallway. The case included serious charges for sex trafficking and racketeering. On those, he was found not guilty, but he's still in jail awaiting sentencing. And he was convicted of 2 charges related to prostitution, which means he faces up to 20 years behind bars. But Combs' attorneys believe he should only spend a few more months behind bars. And that sentence is going to be taking place very soon. The question is, pre-trial, a lot of people were thinking, oh boy, we're going to find out these details of these parties where these victims are going to be abused. And I think people's imaginations went to one level. Then you sat through, well, you read about it because there were no cameras, the trial, and it was like, all right, well, he's kind of just a weirdo sitting in the corner in this room while these people were having sex with his girlfriends. It was a little different than I think people thought. But that video at the elevator, there's nothing you have to say about it. That's a million words. I mean, that's it. That's something that he can never really get away with. That behavior, it really hit people hard. So, what actually was going on? And the question that we are going to start off with is Sean Diddy Combs a predator or a voyeur? Just the weirdo in the hotel room, or was he an absolute monster? Cassie Ventura talked about it. Here to help us answer this question is the host of the Outlier podcast and pop crime television reporter, Lauren Coughlin. Ladies, thank you for your time. And trial attorney, former prosecutor Katie Fang is with us as well. This is, I don't know, before the trial, the weird details of these freak-offs was just sort of out there, that they had these issues, these parties. And then when it came down to it, we learned a lot more of what was specifically going on. What's your take to that question? Lauren, you first.
Yes, I mean, I sat through the entire trial, and I said this from the beginning. I'm not trying to help the guy out. He clearly has a lot of problems. He should have been convicted years ago on aggravated assault, but I do take issue with the government treating him like he's some kind of Sinaloa cartel sex trafficker here. And look, a jury acquitted him on this. They acquitted him of the most serious charges, sex trafficking and racketeering. So here we are, we're left with the 2 Mann Act charges. I was actually in court yesterday when his appellate lawyer was arguing that these charges should actually be dropped because the Mann Act is outdated, it's racist, and it's frankly, and this is, her words, and I'm paraphrasing, it's a disgrace to the Constitution. And she even cited some cases where judges and juries don't even uphold the Mann Act here. And another thing about this, I think both the government and the defense agree that the term prostitution here, it is constitutionally vague. So in my opinion, when it does come to sentencing next week, it's going to be a huge battle of case law, if you will. But I mean, just going back to your original question, I sat through the whole trial. Yes, I felt like pieces of my soul I will never get back. I learned way too much about this man's personal life and what he prefers in the bedroom. He is absolutely not perfect. He is verbally and physically abusive, in certain instances, but he just wasn't on trial for that. So it's, again, it feels wrong to say it, I guess, because he has hurt so many women. But, we're talking about the law. And, I'm not a lawyer, but this is my opinion.
Katie, your thoughts?
Well, the jury did its job. And to Lauren's point, right, the jury could have returned a verdict if it had found that the evidence as presented by the prosecution met the elements of the crimes that were charged against this particular defendant. And I think that is the reason why the judge in this case, as he's contemplating whether or not he's going to grant a motion for a new trial or he's going to set aside the jury's verdict, I think the judge is going to say no, because the jury went through the specific charges, spent time deliberating, and was able to actually thoughtfully set aside the video surveillance, right? All of the allegations of physical abuse. And they were able to come to a determination that only 2 of those federal charges fit with the evidence, and it met the burden of proof that the prosecution had. I also think that if there is an issue with either the constitutionality of the Mann Act or whether or not it is now outdated or if it's racist or it doesn't have applicability anymore, I think the judge is going to say, that's not within my purview to make those determinations. That's something that needs to be done by the legislatures. It's not my job. Now, listen, this day and age, there's a lot of blurring in terms of the separation of powers, right? But this judge has shown that through a multi-week trial, through a lot of evidence, that there's been a lot of pretrial motions. Remember, this idea that was presented by the defense that's being argued now in terms of the sentencing, that he should not be jailed for having different tastes than perhaps you and I would have when it comes to things that happen behind closed doors. That was a theme that ran through the entirety of the defense's case. And the jury could have rejected that when it came to the Mann Act charges, but it chose to convict him for those 2.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Lauren sort of touched on earlier, technically he's facing the prosecution, he was found guilty of these prostitution-related charges, and it is weird. The facts of this case are weird, and when you look at the, I guess, quote, victims, the prostitutes, you're talking about, males like Sheree the Punisher Hayes coming in and being, flown to Los Angeles or wherever and going through this. He was on with us, and take a listen to what he said about what Sean Combs' behavior was like during the freak-offs.
He never partakes. He's always, for the most part, a great distance away. And almost all of his interactions was just directions in terms of visual cues, body positioning, a suggestion of maybe more oil. And if there was further suggestions, I didn't hear them because there was a routine. If they needed to have a conversation, he would stand up at times and just walk out of the room. And Ms. Ventura would take that as a cue, leave the room with him. They would have a brief conversation, be gone for a period of time, and then she would return and we would resume. And sometimes with her resuming, she would give me instructions or the act or something would change. But I don't know if that was directly from him or her. But I know all of their communications were outside of an environment for me to see or hear. So I can't give you the real structure or means of where the directions came from.
Lauren, you were in the courtroom at the end of the day hearing all the testimony about these freak-offs. Was he the directing porn, or what was his role in your opinion?
I mean, it's funny that this is brought up now because something that AUSA Slavic said yesterday was Mr. Combs, or the defendant, was not an amateur porn director, but it was argued that it was his right to do this if he wanted to film it. He did not film every single freak off, every single hotel night. But yeah, we heard a lot of this. We heard that sometimes he directed, you know, we heard sometimes Cassie or Jane appeared to enjoy it. We heard this from third parties, and it's also interesting because Judge Subramanian specifically asked the government to bring case examples to sentencing, and I wrote it down, where person A transports person B to have sex with person C, because this is kind of rare. It's not, you know, it's not super common. So, you know, Slavic said, well, I don't have examples now, but yes, I will bring them, you know, next week. So I think the fact that the government is essentially asking for, I think, close to 4 years on really what is a prostitution charge where the defendant or the convicted didn't have any type of financial gain is also really interesting. It's really strange. You don't see a lot of this here. I will say, I do think Judge Subramanian is under a lot of pressure just because of the media, and I hate to say it, but because Diddy's reputation is not great, and I think so many people who were not in the courtroom, and you know, it wasn't televised, and they just kind of read headlines, they sit there and they're horrified. This man got away with so much. Well, guys, he really didn't. Again, like you said, if you were in the courtroom, that's not really how it went down. So I don't envy the judge in this situation, because I do think it's going to be difficult. However, if he does get anything more than 14 months time served, maybe let's say 6 months extra tops, I'll be shocked. I will be shocked.
Well, we will find out. Lauren, thank you for your insight and your valuable time on this Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Katie's going to stick around. Coming up next, more VPI. Can Diddy's career recover?
My two best friends were just murdered.
Join me for a Court TV true crime series where we take you from the crime scene to the courtroom.
Donna Adelson hates every piece of grass that Dan Martell ever walked on.
It's something that'll haunt all of us forever.
It always seemed like he was covering or deceiving.
This was a whole different level.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rowlands, a Court TV original series. Season premieres September 27th.
Only on Court TV.
Mick.
It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. Sometimes you gotta do that. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now.
As alleged in the indictment, to carry out this conduct, Sean Combs led and participated in a racketeering conspiracy that used the business empire he controlled to carry out criminal activity.
Sean Diddy Combs continues to serve time as he awaits his formal sentencing for the 2 counts that he was found guilty of in his federal trial. The government wants him to do up to 4 years in prison. His defense says, not so fast. He should be out on time served. The bottom line is he's going to get out. And then what? What will happen to his career? We're going to talk about that, but first, here's Court TV's Kelly Craft with a look at the rise and fall of Sean Diddy Combs.
Sean Combs was born and raised in Harlem. His father died when Combs was just 3 years old. His mother told him he had died in a car accident, but that was not true. Here's Combs' 2014 commencement speech at Howard University.
I went to the library and I did some research. And when I typed in my father's name and the day he died, I read in the Amsterdam News that he had been murdered and a drug deal going bad.
In 1990, as a student at Howard University, he received an internship at Uptown Records. Combs left college and worked his way up at Uptown, but was fired in 1993. He started his own label, Bad Boy, and released Biggie's debut album.
It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine, Salt and Pepper and Heavy D up in the limousine.
In 1997, Biggie was shot and killed. Combs released I'll Be Missing You, which would end up winning a Grammy. Although he had lost his friend, Combs was on top of the world and became known for his star-studded white parties.
Everybody became friends, and a lot of people, really kept friendships from that. It was something that I just did every summer.
Combs started a fashion line in 1998. In 1999, he was charged with attacking a music executive and sentenced to an anger management course. And while with his then-girlfriend Jennifer Lopez at a club, a shooting took place, wounding 3 people. He was charged with gun possession and with offering his driver money to take the rap. He was acquitted at trial in 2001.
I just want to say I give all glory to God.
By 2004, Combs was on TV, in movies, and still making hit music. He performed at the Super Bowl halftime show. In 2007, he began his multi-million-dollar partnership with Ciroc Vodka. In the fall of 2023, his empire started to crumble. Just after releasing his first album in 17 years, his ex-girlfriend, R&B singer Cassie, sued him for abuse and rape. And in September 2024, he was arrested on federal charges.
All right, so the question now that we are going to tackle, it's pretty basic. Once he's out, can Diddy's career recover? Let's talk about it with the editor-in-chief of Hip Hop Inquirer magazine. Dennis Byron is here, and entertainment host Holland Reed also joining us on this Friday night. Dennis, your thoughts? He'll be out maybe sooner than later. To what extent will others want to collaborate, or are we staying clear? What do you see in your crystal ball for his career once he's out?
A question about collaboration is interesting, and a reason why I say that is I was in the courtroom pretty much every day watching the trial and seeing who came in and who showed up at the courthouse. I don't think the collaboration, even on his side, he may even want, but I think that with his children being in music, at least 2 of them, King Combs and one of his other children being in music, he might not be so interested in getting around the same people he was around prior to having these charges brought upon him. Will he be able to bounce back? Not like the Diddy of early 2000s or even the late 98, 97, but I think there's still some type of opportunity out there for him to do music or mentor others.
Holland, what's your take?
My take is this is going to be one major mountain for him to climb. This is going to be a moral pivot for him. This is going to be a PR tour from the gods if he can get back on track. The thing is, we all saw too much. We saw too much. Even though, like your previous guest said, he was not on trial for abuse or sexual assault or any of those things, but we saw it all. And unfortunately, that's something that is going to follow him for the rest of his life. We're talking about brand deals, festivals, events. I think the trust has been lost. It doesn't matter what he liked in the bedroom or what he liked behind closed doors or what have you. It all becomes that he used it in an abusive way to sustain power. He's been protected by his celebrity for so long. So I do think that at this time, if anything, he's going to probably try to be in control like he has done his entire career in his life. And that's probably him monetizing his own story, monetizing his own redemption story, maybe, his own documentaries. I just don't see him getting back in the good graces of those who he's hurt along the way, because we absolutely saw too much. Now, we might have a younger generation that doesn't really know him or doesn't really care, but I think the people that either are loyal to him will stay loyal, but the people that saw what we saw during this entire trial are definitely keeping their hands off of him moving forward, unless there is a miracle that comes down and he's got to do a complete moral pivot, I think.
Dennis, any chance he just goes away and stays by himself and sort of is done?
Okay, first off, I'm going to have to disagree with your guess. Mr. Combs has done a lot of good in the music industry. He's helped a lot of careers. If you've attended as many parties that I've attended that he's hosted, not freak-off parties, but regular parties, It was the who's who. The now president even attended his parties. I don't think that just being in the room with him, he brings a certain energy. And I saw a lot in the trial, and I saw a lot that kind of dispelled some of the misinformation that was out there. So I think he'll bounce back. It won't be a rapid bounce back, but I think that with the marketing skills that he has and the team he puts around him, I think he'll be okay.
Holland, a final word.
I will agree and also disagree. I can play both sides of that coin. Yes, he did help a lot of people in his careers. Yes, he did bring a lot of people up in the industry with him. But what we saw was an abusive, drug-fueled, angry, unhinged CEO that used power, manipulation, coercion to get his way over decades, and it's been known for decades. I don't care how many wonderful, beautiful white parties that he had. He was doing a million other things behind closed doors that maybe just because you did not see it and you didn't go to them, that were happening and that affected people's lives for the rest of their lives that they will never be able to get over. So while I agree with you, he is definitely a mogul and a monument. He's a monument in the music industry, a mogul in this industry. That does not negate his abuse and the harm that he has caused within the industry and people's lives as well.
All right, let's leave it there. Guests are going to stick with us. Up next, what do we really know about these freak-offs?
Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs.
I'm Ted Rowlands filling in for Vinnie Politan. Good to have you along with us as we continue our investigation into the case against Sean Diddy Combs. The legal battle isn't over as the sentencing date for his federal case draws near. Here's the story. Sean Diddy Combs is a legend in the music industry, known for founding Bad Boy Records and launching the careers of artists like Notorious B.I.G. and Mary J. Blige. Beyond music, Combs ventured into fashion with his Sean John clothing line and co-founded the television network Revolt. But Diddy's world would change dramatically when he was arrested in September of 2024, and more details about his parties he called freak-offs started emerging. He did escape the fate of life in prison after acquittals on the two most serious charges he was facing in his high-profile federal trial. He's still locked up, awaiting sentencing for a conviction on two charges related to prostitution, which carry a total of possibly 20 years in prison. But his attorneys think he should only spend a few more months behind bars. And it, of course, will be up to a judge to how long he spends in prison. The government wants 4 years. That's at the top end. Yes, technically, if he was sentenced to the max, it would be 20 if you combine the two charges. Not going to happen. So the government wants 4. Defense wants him out today. Get him out. They believe that he shouldn't be in prison for just being weird. That's basically what was brought into trials, that he had these freak-offs, and that he would hire people in, like Sheree Hayes, who they called the Punisher, to come in, and he would perform-ish, have sex with Cassie, and Sean would sit there and watch, and that's about it. Well, we talked to Sheree about it, and he talked about Sean's role, I guess, in these freak-offs. Here's what he said.
While we were in the acting mode, it wasn't really any conversation between me and her, other than us playing our roles. And as I was not supposed to acknowledge Mr. Combs, he didn't acknowledge and speak to me in any way. He would give subtle directions to Ms. Ventura in regards to more of lighting situations. The room was candlelit, it was kind of dim, so he would give instructions in terms of move the candles a little bit more, position your body this way. Even if it was something for me to do, he would ask her to ask me. Have him move to the left. So it was a very diligent, deliberate effort to avoid any interactions with me directly.
That was the Punisher talking to Court TV. That gets us to our next question in the investigation. What do we really know about these freak-offs? Well, let's bring back Dennis Byron and Holland Reed. Dennis, you were in the courtroom during most of this trial. What was your take on what was going on in these freak-offs?
It appears that Diddy's into voyeurism. It appears that Diddy is into amateur filmmaking. Doesn't appear that he did anything outside of the lifestyle that those who are into voyeurism do, with the exception of putting his hand on Cassie in a violent way. But it appears, based on even your guess, the Punisher's assessment of what he witnessed, it does appear that he was into voyeurism and filming it. And Cassie, too, from what I've learned from this trial, she bought him a TV so they can watch it together. This sounds like behavior of 2 or more consenting adults. It doesn't sound like he was doing anything outside the lifestyle that he was living with his girlfriends.
Holland, one part of the equation is that Cassie did testify to, and Dennis mentioned it, that there was some abuse that went along with the freak-offs at times if he was upset. What's your overall take on all of this?
Wow, what a loaded question. My take is, I think somewhere along the lines of a lot of this conversation tonight, we have forgotten that this trial also involved arson. This trial also involved Diddy, his assistants being abused, not being able to change their tampons, being kidnapped, being held against their will, being forced to the freak-offs, the elevator video of Cassie actually trying to leave a freak-off. I think that what happens in those freak-offs is what happens. I think there is so much we just don't know. And those who are willing participants, okay, they're grown adults. Hopefully all of them were grown adults. But at the end of it, we saw too much. The freak-offs were a part of his abuse. They were a part of his grooming. Now, whether Cassie liked it sometimes, liked it sometimes, and other times she did not, that's Cassie's prerogative. I think that was a little bit damning for the case. But at the overall arching of this whole thing is that we keep forgetting this was not just about freak-offs. It was about freak-offs being a tool for his abuse and his blackmailing and his coercion. And I think that's been lost a lot in this conversation. But to sum that up, as far as the freak-offs and what do I think of all of this, I think it's a mess. And I think you're right. It's just very weird. I think we've seen too much. I think we don't want to know the intricacies of what goes on in people's bedrooms. But when you're using it in a power dynamic to control business, to manipulate other artists, stars, rising artists, that's where the problem lies. That's where the RICO charge did not stand. But unfortunately, here we are. And I do believe this will end up being a slap on the wrist.
Here's more from the Punisher.
The furniture in the living room were all covered in sheets. In the proximity of the sofa and a chair, you can see that there were bowls of warm water with bottles of baby oil in it. And she explained that we were going to create this scene where I was going to put baby oil on myself. She was going to do the same. We may oil each other, and eventually her husband would come out and watch at some point. And I was specifically instructed that when her husband came out, to not look at him, don't talk to him, try my best to not acknowledge him. We're supposed to act like he's not even present.
Dennis, did you get the feeling that, listening to the testimony, that he was an unhinged, maniacal, just sort of self-absorbed, powerful person that is abusing that power, or a weirdo in the corner watching his lover have sex with other people?
You used the term weirdo. I used the term him and being involved in a lifestyle. I'm not in that lifestyle. I don't know what goes on in that lifestyle. But if we poll 20 people that are in that lifestyle, they may have a different opinion on his behavior. I've never sat in a room watching someone make love to my woman. No one gets that pleasure. But I would say this. There has been a lot said about him and the alleged abuse of these 2 women, but he's charged with 2 man acts. He did not participate physically with these entertainers. There are 2 people that didn't get charged with the man acts, and they're witnesses against him. and they actually participated in the prostitution. He didn't. He was in the corner watching.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Let's hear from Cassie. This was testimony, now this is through AI because no cameras were in that courtroom, but this is the transcript of what she said on the witness stand talking about the freak-offs from her perspective.
How much money did Sean pay to settle your lawsuit?
$20 million.
Would you give that money back if it meant you never had to have freak-offs?
Objection.
It's overruled.
I'd give that money back if it meant I never had to have freak-offs. If never had to have freak-offs, I would have agency and autonomy, and I would...
Objection.
It's overruled.
You can continue, Ms. Ventura.
I wouldn't have to work so hard to get it back.
And when you say get it back, are you talking about the agency and autonomy that you mentioned?
Yeah.
Do you remember when defense counsel asked you yesterday if freak-offs were a special time that you cherished?
Yeah.
How would you describe the experience of an escort urinating in your mouth while you were on the floor?
Objection.
Sustained.
How many times did Sean insist you have a freak-off when you still had a UTI?
All the time. Frequently.
And did Sean beat you during freak-offs?
Yes.
Once or more than once?
More than once.
How did you feel during the freak-offs when Sean beat you?
Worthless, just like dirt, like I didn't matter to him. But that I was nothing, like absolutely nothing.
At the beginning of your relationship, were you open to freak-offs?
I was open in the very beginning to trying it.
Did defense counsel show you a number of messages that reflected some of that openness over the past 2 days?
Yeah.
Did that openness change?
Over time, yeah.
And after it changed, did you want to have freak-offs?
I didn't.
Did you feel that you could say no?
No.
Holland, he wasn't charged with abusing Cassie. That elevator video had nothing to do with the charges against him. But as we talked about earlier, if he's ever going to come back, these are the things, this is the problem, right?
This is absolutely the problem. And even when your guest said, you know, he believes that he's just a voyeur, it's not just that. I mean, this is a man that is literally saying, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then X, Y, and Z will happen to you. That's past being a wannabe amateur porn producer, okay? That is an abuser. That is someone that is literally using his power. He's using sex. He's using these freak-offs and whatever else he's got up his sleeve, baby oil, what have you, prostitutes, what have you, to get what he wants in these scenarios. And while he might get a kick out of those types of videos, those videos were not just because Cassie enjoyed it all the time. I think that's the thing that we have to remember when we're talking about this. I think that trying to paint him as just some wannabe producer is making light of the severity of this situation. This was someone that drugged people with baby oils. This is someone that, you know, threatened people if they didn't perform in his voyeurism. That is where this comes down to. This is not just about the RICO trial. This is about his moral character. While I'm not judging him, he can do whatever he wants behind closed doors. But when you're doing it in an abusive, narcissistic, you know, drug-fueled, unhinged manner, and it affects people's lives, that is the problem, period.
Dennis, is that a valid point, that this was two-pronged? Yes, he had the predilection for the voyeurism, but then also he was abusive and off the rails.
Let's keep the record straight. He was never charged with drugging anyone. That is a mischaracterization of what happened in the courtroom. He did drugs, they did drugs, but he never drugged anyone. So let's, you know, we're not going to, you know, it was enough slander done in this case. Let's just focus on the behavior. The behavior, some of the things he did that Cassie testified to, problematic. However, she in 2018 got involved with him again while she was dating the trainer that he paid for. So she's a grown adult. She has to take some kind of responsibility. And I didn't read anywhere that she donated any of that money that she received from the Intercontinental or the $20 million that she received from him.
Well, let's leave it there. We don't want to get it's Friday night. Let's just relax and have a good weekend. Maybe not a free coffee weekend, but just a good weekend. Dennis, thank you. Holland, thank you. Still to come, does Diddy have a good chance of getting out after he's sentenced?
Sean Combs has not sexually assaulted anybody.
Brutal murders of 2 young girls. Delphi is not one of those places where this would happen.
I killed Abby and Lodi.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rowlands. Season premieres Saturday night, 8 Eastern and Pacific.
Only on Court TV.
Next week.
A father faces a jury for the murder of his daughter's boyfriend. We're previewing each day's proceedings in the Plotting Parents murder trial.
Opening statements with Julie Grant. Mornings at 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
Today I'm announcing the unsealing of a 3-count indictment, charging Sean Combs with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, interstate transportation for prostitution. The indictment alleges that between at least 2008 and the present, Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. As alleged in the indictment, to carry out this conduct, Sean Combs led and participated in a racketeering conspiracy that used the business empire he controlled to carry out criminal activity, including sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and the obstruction of justice.
Is Sean Combs' time behind bars coming to an end, or does he still have significant time to serve? We'll find out soon enough. His upcoming sentencing hearing will determine that. The government wants 4 years. His side wants time served. Here's Mark Agnifilo talking after the verdict.
It's a great victory for Sean Combs. It's a great victory for the jury system. You saw that the Southern District of New York prosecutors came at him with all that they had. They're not stopping, but one thing stands between all of us and a prison, and that is a jury of 12 citizens. And we had a wonderful jury. They listened to every word, and they got the situation right, or certainly right enough. They acquitted him of the sex trafficking, which he was absolutely innocent of. They acquitted him of the racketeering conspiracy that he was absolutely innocent of, and all of the components to it. The kidnapping, he was innocent of that. The arson, he was innocent of that. The obstructing justice, he was innocent of that. And that is no longer just me saying that. That is the verdict of our jury.
That's Mark Agnifilo. They did a great job, the defense did, along with Tenny Garagosa and team, after or during that trial. Now we'll find out what happens at sentencing. Let's head to our next question, and that is, does Sean Diddy Combs have a good chance of getting out of prison with time served, which is what the defense is asking here. Here to help with our investigation, federal white-collar advisor and sentencing mitigation expert Sam Mangle, and still here, trial lawyer, former prosecutor Katie Fang. Katie, what's your take in terms of where the judge lands here? You've got the 4 on one side and time served on the other. Where do you think it's landing?
And never the twain shall meet is what the idea is probably going to be. Assuming the judge does not grant any motion for new trial or to vacate the jury's verdict, at this point, I do not believe that this judge, in light of how the jury returned its verdict, is going to give the defense what it's seeking, which is 14 months. To be clear, Sean Combs has been in custody for at least 13 months, so he gets the credit for that time served, and that's why it pretty much would be tantamount to him walking out of jail if he got those 14 months. There have been 2 attempts by the defense to be able to get him out of custody pending the sentencing, which is coming up on October 3rd. From pretty much all the indications right now, the government's sentencing memorandum has not been released, so we don't really know what they're seeking, but we can assume that they're going to try to seek the maximum, which could be up to actually more than 4 years, could be up to almost 6 years and 3 months, or even 7 years. And so I think you have a pretty wide spread there for the judge to be able to use his judicial discretion to be able to sentence him accordingly.
Here's a bit of what the defense has articulated in filing. Lawyers urging the New York federal judge here to sentence him to no more than 14 months in prison for his conviction on 2 prostitution-related charges, meaning he'd go free almost immediately. The lawyers made their arguments in a written submission, basically saying, hey, Judge, you gotta work with us here. But the judge has already rejected this proposed $50 million bail package, which they wanted him to be out on bail during this process, saying he doesn't believe that the artist is close to being released. So that could be an indication that there's a long way to go here. Combs' celebrity status in the realms of music, fashion, spirits, media, and finance have been shattered, and that's punishment enough, according to his defense. Likely, Sam, it's going to be, like Katie says, somewhere in the middle there. What's his life look like with his celebrity status if he's doing time in a federal prison, not just a jail?
Well, first, let me say, and I agree with what Katie just said. I was contacted about 3 weeks ago by a former client who also happens to be the mother of 2 of Sean Combs' youngest children. And her question was, where do I recommend that he serves his sentence? What do I think is the best place? Miami had come up because of his residence. I suggested a few other places. So I do believe that somewhere in the defense's mind, they are planning for some amount of time for him to be spent in prison. The question comes down to where will he serve it based upon the amount of time he has. Right now, at the Brooklyn MDC where he's serving, they're actually keeping people in custody there that have been sentenced. Even though a federal judge had asked that they don't do that, that sentenced inmates get designated and sent to federal prisons. If he is sentenced to any time, and remember, he has to serve 85% of his sentence, he is not entitled to any First Step Act time reductions because of the nature of his sentence. He'll go to a low-security facility, a Miami, a Danbury, a Terminal Island in Los Angeles. I don't think he'll have any problem there. It'll certainly be much better than where he currently is in Brooklyn.
Absolutely. A lot of stories, horror stories out of the Brooklyn facility. Katie, bottom line it for us. Does he deserve prison time?
He deserves the prison time. A jury of his peers returned a verdict accordingly, and if the sentencing guidelines are any indication, he's going to get more than the 14 months that's being sought and more than the 13 months that he's been in custody. I will also dispense with this idea. There has been a lot of chatter as to whether or not he's going to be pardoned by President Donald Trump. Just a few weeks ago, during some questioning on another news channel, he was asked, as in Trump was asked, if he was going to be pardoning Sean Combs, and he actually said, well, he used to say some nice stuff about me, but then during the election he said bad stuff, so I don't think so, versus statements he made about George Santos, who's in federal prison, and Donald Trump said, well, the guy's always been pretty consistent about saying nice stuff about me, so maybe I'll think about pardoning George Santos. So, I mean, look, I think that you're not going to see a pardon from Donald Trump, so they can probably put that to bed. But I will say the defense has a pretty good argument that Sean Combs has done well, quote unquote. I'll say that. I mean, jail is horrible for anybody. Mm-hmm. But in this instance, he has actually achieved sobriety for the first time in 20-something years. Yeah. And he's also been running a program for other inmates. And so he's been doing about as well.
We got to leave it there. Thank you both. Have a great weekend. That's it for us. I'm Ted Rowlands filling in for Vinnie. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.